In the shadow of the Ottoman Empire's gilded palaces, where minarets pierced the heavens, and sultans reigned as gods among men, a sinister machinery ground human souls to dust. What depravity could an empire, lauded for its architectural splendor and martial prowess, conceal beneath its silken veils? The truth, buried in dusty archives and whispered by the bones of the forgotten, reveals a system where intimacy was forged into a weapon of control, exploitation, and terror. From the systematic theft of children to the commodification of women's bodies, the Ottomans wove a tapestry of cruelty that spanned centuries, its threads stained with the anguish of millions. This is no mere tale of conquest, but a descent into the abyss of institutionalized depravity. A story long obscured demands revelation. For those drawn to the shadows of history, consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts below. Across the rugged hills of the Balkans, where Christian villages clung to traditions older than the empire itself, Ottoman officials descended like specters of fate. Their purpose was not to collect coin or grain, but to harvest the most precious yield: children. The Devshirme, known as the blood tax, was a chillingly efficient mechanism, its bureaucracy as cold as the steel that enforced it. Every few years, officials armed with meticulous ledgers swept through hamlets, cataloguing Christian families and their sons, aged 7 to 20, sometimes as young as 4. These were no random abductions. The empire's records tracked human misery with the precision of a merchant's scales, marking boys as livestock to be claimed. The selection was a ritual of cruelty. Boys were inspected like chattel, teeth bared, limbs tested, minds probed for signs of promise or defiance. The most radiant, those deemed fit for the Sultan's palace, faced a fate far darker than labor, in fields or mines. Torn from their mother's arms, they were stripped of names, language, and faith, their identities erased in a deliberate act of psychological annihilation. Forbidden to speak of home, beaten for clinging to memories, they became blank parchments upon which the empire inscribed its will. Many were destined for the Janissary Corps, elite warriors bound to celibacy and absolute loyalty to the Sultan. Yet, even here, intimacy was twisted into a tool of control. The empire institutionalized homoerotic bonds within the ranks, creating the Chival Battalion, a military unit designed to regulate desire, ensuring sexual tensions served the Sultan's discipline rather than disrupted it. This was no mere conscription, but a calculated theft of humanity. Boys who once played in village lanes were remade into instruments of imperial ambition, their pasts reduced to ash. Parents, left in silence, could only imagine the horrors awaiting their sons in distant Constantinople. The empire's ledgers, preserved in Turkish archives, reveal the scale of this trauma. Thousands taken, families shattered, and a cycle of suffering set to endure for centuries. Yet this was but the first thread in the Ottoman tapestry of exploitation, a prelude to cruelties yet more profane. In the shadowed corridors of Ottoman power, where ambition and cruelty intertwined, the empire's appetite for control birthed a practice so barbaric it defies the bounds of humanity. Castration, performed with chilling precision, was not a mere act of violence, but a cornerstone of imperial design. To circumvent Islamic prohibitions, the procedure was outsourced to Christian, or Jewish, surgeons in distant lands like Egypt and Ethiopia. The cost was staggering. Historical records, etched in the cold ink of Ottoman scribes, suggest only 1 in 10 boys survived the ordeal. The mathematics of this brutality is a grim testament. 1,000 children mutilated to yield 100 eunuchs, 900 lives extinguished for the empire's perverse needs. Those who endured emerged as shadows of their former selves, their bodies and spirits irrevocably altered. Black eunuchs, often African boys stripped of their entire genitalia, were deemed trustworthy guardians of the Sultan's harem, their mutilation a grotesque prerequisite for proximity to power. Some rose to wield significant influence, their loyalty bought at the price of their humanity. White eunuchs, typically Balkan boys, with only their testicles removed, served in administrative roles, their partial emasculation a calculated balance between utility and submission. Both were severed from the possibility of normal human bonds, marriage, fatherhood, or intimacy, as nature intended, became relics of a stolen past. The psychological toll was as devastating as the physical. These boys, once vibrant with dreams, were reduced to instruments of the empire's will, their identities erased in service to a system that saw them as less than human. The Ottoman archives, preserved with bureaucratic indifference, detail the logistics of this horror, the ages of the boys, the locations of the surgeries, the quotas to be filled. This was no aberration, but a calculated enterprise, its efficiency rivaled only by its cruelty. The survivors, marked by their scars, lived in a liminal space, neither fully men nor free, existing solely to serve a master who had stolen their very essence. Yet, this was not the end of the empire's moral decline. The machinery of exploitation reached further, entangling the lives of those deemed too refined for mere servitude. Beneath the flickering torchlight of Ottoman feasts, where wine flowed and laughter concealed a troubling undercurrent, the empire revealed its most audacious displays of excess. The Czech dancers, young boys adorned in silken garments styled to mimic women, moved gracefully through the haze of celebration. Their performances, a striking yet unsettling imitation of elegance. These children, selected for their graceful features, existed in a liminal space, neither fully aligned with traditional roles in a society that found fascination in their ambiguity. Their dances, intended to captivate, often stirred a restless energy. Historical accounts, recorded in the detached narratives of foreign diplomats, depict scenes of disorder. Men, caught in fervent disputes, broke glassware and caused disruption in their fervor, creating an atmosphere of chaos. These boys, deprived of autonomy, were compelled to endure the pressures of their audience, their plight overlooked as a minor detail in the empire's grand spectacles. Yet even this public spectacle faded in comparison to the concealed hardships of the Tavsolan system. Referred to as bunny boys, these young Christian youths, often from Greek or Balkan origins, were discreetly brought to the Sultan's private quarters to serve the whims of high-ranking officials. Veiled in secrecy, they possessed no formal status, no safeguards, and little prospect of release. Their presence was a hushed anomaly, deliberately omitted from the empire's detailed records, yet evident in its severity. These boys, neither soldiers nor traditional servants, were subjected to a profound misuse of their youth and grace, marking a deep violation of their inherent worth. The Ottoman elite, draped in authority, orchestrated this quiet hardship, ensuring that the trials of these children remained shielded from public awareness. The psychological wreckage was profound. Czech dancers, exposed to the leering crowds, and Tavsolan boys, concealed in the palace's depths, were united in their loss of self. Their bodies, reduced to instruments of pleasure, bore the weight of a society that normalized such violation. Ottoman records, though scant on Devshirme, hint at the scale through omissions, gaps where lives were erased. The empire's indifference to these boys' fates reveals a chilling truth. Their suffering was not a flaw, but a feature of imperial design. This was no mere cultural quirk, but a deliberate descent into moral decay, a prelude to an even vaster machinery of exploitation. In the bustling markets of Constantinople, where the cries of merchants mingled with the clink of coin, the Ottoman Empire crafted a commerce of human flesh that rivaled its conquests in scale and cruelty. Women, torn from distant lands, Africa, the Caucasus, the Balkans, were reduced to mere wares, their lives priced with the cold precision of a ledger. Ottoman records, preserved with chilling detachment, reveal a hierarchy of value. Virgins commanded fortunes, European women outpriced their African counterparts, and young girls, their futures stolen, fetched the highest sums. The odalisques, destined for the imperial harems, were the most prized, their beauty and training inflating their worth to tens of thousands of kurush. These women were not merely sold. They were sculpted into commodities, trained in seduction and submission at specialized facilities, their trauma polished into a veneer of allure for their master's pleasure. The harem, far from the romanticized haven of silks and perfumes, was a crucible of fear and rivalry. Women, stripped of identity, competed in a brutal theater of degradation, each act more debasing than the last, to secure a fleeting elevation from slave to concubine. The empire's design fostered this discord, pitting women against each other in a relentless struggle for survival. Failure invited punishments, beatings, starvation, or execution, while success offered only temporary reprieve. The legal system, complicit in this horror, granted no protections. A slave's body was her master's property, her children his to sell or destroy. Constantinople's markets teemed with hundreds of thousands of such women, their numbers swelled by military campaigns, calculated not just for territory, but for human plunder. The fate of their offspring was no less grim. Infants born of African mothers, particularly those of mixed race, were often killed at birth, their existence erased to preserve the empire's racial hierarchies. Those women who aged beyond desirability faced abandonment, sold to brothels, or left to perish, their years of service rewarded with oblivion. Ottoman laws, which punished the rape of free women with death, deemed the violation of slaves a mere fine, equating their suffering to damaged goods. This was a system where sexual exploitation was not a byproduct, but a pillar of imperial wealth, its tendrils woven into trade routes and diplomatic pacts. The scars of this commerce lingered long after the empire's fall, a testament to its unrelenting machinery of dehumanization. Yet, this was but one facet of a broader legacy of moral ruin. The Ottoman Empire, a colossus that spanned centuries and continents, crafted a legacy not only of conquest, but of a chilling machinery that ground human dignity to dust. Its sexual practices, woven into the very fabric of imperial governance, were no mere aberrations, but deliberate systems of exploitation, their efficiency matched only by their cruelty. From the stolen childhoods of the Devshirme to the commodified bodies in Constantinople's markets, the empire normalized the unthinkable, turning intimacy into a weapon and suffering into spectacle. The scars of these practices, etched in the silent archives and the bones of the forgotten, whisper a truth that endures, unchecked power can corrupt the most sacred aspects of humanity. This history, though distant, is not remote. The last sultan fell in 1922, within the memory of a fading generation. Its lessons remain stark. Civilization is fragile, and the normalization of dehumanization a peril ever present. The millions who suffered deserve their stories told, their humanity restored through the unflinching light of truth. For those stirred by this dark chapter, consider subscribing and sharing reflections below. History's shadows demand vigilance, lest they rise again.